So, we're going to move on to Aquafin. Jan, you're up.
Right, everybody hears me. So my name is Jan Leroy. I'm working for.
Is it on?
It's on.
Hold it closer.
I'm Jan. Oh, that's much better. I'm Jan Leroy. I'm working for Aquafin for 15 years about now. First, I will introduce Aquafin or Aquafin. Aquafin is a Belgian company located in Belgium. It's established in 1990 by the Flemish government to treat the sewage water of domestic households. We have as mission to keep the rivers clean, so it all starts at everyone's home, where you flush the toilet and it comes into the sewer pipes. It goes to our sewer treatment plants, and that's actually the product we are dealing with in our firm. Some key figures: Aquafin has about 1,200 pumping stations, 5,000 kilometers of sewer pipes, 251 wastewater treatment plants. We also have as mission to expand and optimize those sewer plants. So we are still building and rebuilding our sewer plants. So that's so far for what Aquafin does, what Aquafin stands for. Now, we at Aquafin, we have selected Alfresco as our ECM program application. Before we had also another ECM application, but it was outdated. The technology was outdated. The user interface was complex. The users didn't like it. They never liked it. But as the years, as the technology moves on, they disliked it more and more. The user requirements didn't match the technology. I have pointed out some points here. And therefore we chose Alfresco. Alfresco had a more intuitive user interface. It's modern, it's evolving, it's still following the new trends. Before we had multiple repositories. It's hard to search something in our ECM. Now we have one repository, and it's a little bit Google-like. Like our users say. In short, it's quite well adopted in our company now. There are other points, like I said, some limited search. Now, after we have more search capabilities. In the past, there were various document sources. There was our ECM system, but users disliked it, so they always had another source for their information to keep. Now they are willing to put their information in our ECM system. They see the advantages, and they can work with it because it's more intuitive. Before we didn't have any document lifecycle. We were just happy they already used the ECM system. Now they are asking for document lifecycle. So such kind of users is for every IT department happy to have. At the moment we are also still implementing the collaboration part through documents, and this part is also welcomed by the users with great expectations. But they are happy because they see the advantages, and they feel that there is a light at the end of the tunnel for them. So next slide. During the project, yes, it was moving from the one ECM system to the other ECM system was quite a challenge, but it was successful at the end. Some challenges I bulleted here. One of the challenges was keep the business involved. ECM, they disliked it. Filling in metadata in a form, nobody likes to do this. So we had to see that the business didn't stay interested in the project. Therefore, we took extensive communication, what cost a lot of time. We had regular releases. We didn't go in our back room programming and configuring the system, but we showed them step by step, in small steps, the changes that were coming up. An accurate migration, very, very important, because they didn't like ECM. They had to put their documents in an old ECM system, and now there was coming a new one. They would like to find their documents again in the new system, so it has to be exact. Stick to deadlines, like every project. And yes, there are always users who are innovative themselves, and they're asking questions about functionalities that aren't existing already. But this morning we saw in the presentation that are coming new functionalities. So share is early adopter, evolving functionalities. That's also also a challenge to keep those users with us, but we managed to do so, and they know that there is coming a lot more functionalities. So that was extensive, but I'm passing the word to David.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody attending after lunch. Yes, my name is David Storey. I don't know if people were in the session first time this morning, but we're going to cover some of that ground again, so apologies if you were. I'm the program manager for UK Power Networks. We're an electricity distributor based in the south of England. We take the electricity that's generated and transmitted via the national grid and then distribute that to homes and businesses in London, in East Anglia and the southeast of England as such. UK Power Networks is a very young organisation. It was only formed in 2011 when they bought the network assets from EDF Energy. But it's interesting the fact that it's a very young organisation, but it's staffed with people who've been in the electricity industry for 40, 45 years in some cases as well. So there's a real dichotomy there of a new order as such, staff with older members of staff. We've got roughly 8 million customers in that region, and very few of them know who we are. They're only interested in who UK Power Networks are when there's a power cut, when we're trying to mop up after a storm, for example, or when we're digging up the road and stopping people from getting to work on time. But none of them pay a bill to us, and it's one of these things that boring is very, very good. If they don't know who we are, we must be doing a good job. However, when things go wrong, they need to be able to find us very, very quickly as such. Our journey, and we've been on this journey for coming up to 2 years now, and it is a program of work, initially was to look at facilitating the business and the IT separation from EDF Energy. The vast majority of applications were brought over from EDF, a lift and shift duplicate, split the data, bring it across as such. However, when they looked at the ECM estate, the content management estate, there were 3 systems there. They were all very long in the tooth, shall we say. Several of them were obsolete. So they actually took the opportunity to invest in a new single platform, and a single platform that would cover web content management, intranet content management, document management, and collaboration as such. So they went for a single modern type platform there, Alfresco, funnily enough. Some of the reasons why the old system was obsolete was that it had been heavily customized, and that basically locked the organization in, that when they came up to point releases of software as such, to take those customizations forward, in many cases, would have cost them exactly the same amount of money as when they had them developed in the first case. So one of our principles based on that was to really stick with out-of-the-box capability wherever possible, to make it easier to apply updates and quicker to apply updates, and to really control the lifetime cost of ownership of the actual solution. UK Power Networks are a very document-rich organisation. It's a safety-critical organisation. They're dealing with voltages that can kill. So it's absolutely critical that accurate information is available to the people at the point that they need to consume that information. Some of the elements that we're trying to get to is really to get to what we call a single source of truth. There was a culture where everybody kept their own copies of everything, just in case. And of course, they were all religiously making sure they had the latest versions and not the one they downloaded 12 years ago. So trying to get trust in what we were presenting to them as being fit for purpose and accurate was part of trying to win the users over to actually using the system as well. They didn't have search, so we were able very, very quickly to leverage the metadata and the content search that's available in the platform. And they didn't have audit either, and as I touched on, they're a safety critical organisation. Actually being able to audit who's seen what following something like a lost time incident is very, very important. Last but by no means least, of the 5,000 employees that are in UK Power Networks, round about 2,500 of those are field-based and very rarely come into offices. They're not tied to a desktop as such. So mobile access and facilitating mobile access is something that's deemed of great importance. However, a lot of the electricity infrastructure is in the middle of a farmer's field where you've got no hope of getting a 3G signal. So that's one of our challenges as well, that we can give them mobile access, but not everywhere where they're working they'll be actually able to get a connection. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to start moving to the questions. There are a couple ground rules. Everything is fair game. It's pretty easy. If you want to know the hard truth, ask the hard question. Ask, listen, and learn. I have a couple questions here, one to start, one to finish, and a couple fillers if you're afraid to ask questions. But ideally, this is for you, and we'd like to hear your questions directly. So, just so you can remember our names. I'm going to ask the first question of our two panelists, and then we'll move on to the audience. And this time we'll start with David. What would you say your hardest challenge was during the project, and how'd you overcome it?
This is a very good question, and when I was trying to think back through, we've probably had a number of challenges at set points in the program, and at that point, this was definitely the hardest problem that we had. However, once we'd fixed that, there'd always be another one waiting for us as well. So if I go back to within like the first 3 months, 4 months of the project, we definitely had some issues around actually getting the technology to work. We engaged the professional services of our partners, Accenture, of our partners in the Alfresco support as such. But actually getting the project launched, the major issues were technical. However, once we got past that stage, onto the next one, and probably where we still are now, it's around adoption. And it's around getting people to actually want to use the system. What Laurence was talking around earlier, we can make it easy for them, we can get them to the water trough, shall we say. We can't necessarily get them to drink or drink an awful lot. And that's, I would say, an ongoing challenge, is to actually to get our user base to actively want to use the system, not just have to use the system.
And yeah.
At our company, it was quite similar. As I said before, they disliked ECM, and now we wanted to implement a new ECM system. So the dislike of ECM for the users was something we had to overcome, and therefore we started small with a small project. And we tried to capture the business demands as much as possible before we started configuring Alfresco. We had elaborate talks with the users. So in order to know what they wanted, what they expected, and then so we could put it in Alfresco, so we could translate their demands, their questions in the system. So, and in order to let them use the application, in order they will use the application, and in order they want to even ask things to make it better, and that was a great challenge. For us to let the users make the program use and not dislike the application.
And I just want to confirm, my hardest problem has always been adoption, and just there's so much in those systems, and just trying to get them to say, no, this is going to make your life easier, and convincing them it's going to make your life easier. And then having them convince each other, that's always the hardest thing to ever get done. The technical stuff at this point is usually much easier. So, would anyone like to ask a question of our panel, or should I move on to my next prepared question? Anyone? Paul? Yeah, I'm going to come to you.
Well, I don't know, I think I've got a loud enough voice.
No, we need a recording.
Oh, I see. Okay. User adoption, you talked about user adoption. I just wondered whether there was any incentives you tried using to get people to use the systems internally.
Yeah, it's a good question, that. We always find that threatening them with the sack has a certain event, a certain part. If we go back to the adoption, don't get me wrong, it wasn't across the patch that we had problems. We had certain departments that really jumped at this and wanted to make it happen from day one. We had other departments that black will always be white, irrespective of what we did. So, you know, setting ourselves challenges as well, we did appreciate that we weren't going to win everybody over. And a bit like a political party coming up to the election, we were looking in the middle ground. They were the ones that we could perhaps most tailor. A couple of the departments recognise that what we're asking people to do in many cases is not their day job. It's in addition to their day job. So they actually took the steps to write this into their IPR, their performance management. So it actually did become part of their day job. And it was recognised that what they were doing is part of their day job, not just something else that's been loaded on them. And that worked very, very well. At the start, one of the other things we did as well, and we've used this a couple of places elsewhere, we actually ran some competitions to name the system. You know, so it's not major, but we launched the new intranet. We're a power company as such, so we actually had a competition with some vouchers, and we took, you know, a list of, I think it was about 40 or 50 entries, whittled that down to about 3, got rid of the ones that were either inappropriate or had already been used. Anything beginning with I, we thought we may be on dodgy ground there. You know, Apple may come after us on that. Oracle, funnily enough, was the biggest one that came up, but this is from business people who don't necessarily know the connotations in the database. But they settled on PowerNet and PowerShare as our environments. And that was a little bit of PR, and it did start to get people engaged.
At our company, the incentive was actually that the people could participate in the program. We had an elaborate, big group of users, and from every department there were users who were asked in advance and announced in advance that there was coming a new ECM system and what they would like to see in that system. And everyone was a little bit interested, a little bit wondered about what it was going to be, the system. So, and the persons who were picked out to represent the business side, they had to do it, like David said it, next to their day-to-day story, and they felt they had the authority to represent the other colleagues, and there are some rather big departments represented by some people, and they promoted it in their circle of colleagues, and they say, hey, have you seen? It's online. You have to check it. How can I see it? Well, type in Alfresco or look up for this document, and you will land in the document. And also our portal was all the documents in our portal were immediately migrated to Alfresco. So when even when they didn't want to use it, sooner or later, when they were going to look for a document, they landed in Alfresco and they say, "Hey, that's new. What's that?" And like in this way, they went to use it without knowing it actually, or there were other colleagues who are spreading the word that there was something new, and they make the marketing for us. So that was yeah, free marketing actually.
That works really well. I want to expand on something that David said, was giving a name to the system. You don't want users going on the internet and looking up Alfresco or whatever software you're rolling out, because then they're going to be looking at that and not focusing on the system that you're rolling out, because you're rolling out a business solution, not just content management. And so by giving it a name, they have a different mindset. And also, if it fails, they don't hate Alfresco, because that's not the name associated with a failure, or any system for that matter. They hate PowerShare. Well, then you can redo it, and you can use the same baseline software, because usually it's not the software's fault. It's other aspects of the system or education or training that failed. And so you don't want them hating the software. You want them hating the system, or actually you don't want them hating anything for that matter. But if they do, you want to be able to reuse it, because it's usually not the fault of the system. Do we have any, another question? Okay. All right, I'll throw out another one. So if you could do...
The previous one, there's one other thing. Sorry, there's one other thing just crossed my mind as well, going back to the adoption, and that was practice what you preach. We within inside the program actually made sure from day one we use these tools and techniques ourselves.
It's a good tip, and a lot of software vendors could learn from that as well. So we'll start this one with John. If you could do anything different in your project to make it more successful or easier for you to have gotten to the end, what would you have done differently?
Well, the migration from the old system to the new system was hard. It was, I think, any migration is hard, but we didn't only change from ECM system, but we also changed the structure, how the documents were structured in the database and represented to the users. We went from a departmental structure where every department and saw his documents to a structure of business processes, and therefore every document had to be individually been migrated. It has to be said this document will become in this process, and it took us a long time and to do the migration that way. It weren't so many documents, but because it's we have to do it like a monk, I think. It was very precise, but afterwards they were very pleased. They could find their documents back in the ECM system, but the workload it had, we spent several hours, nights doing the job.
Go ahead.
You have Alfresco share.
Yes.
Customized as an interface. Knowing what you know today about Alfresco WordDesk, would that have made life easier for you? Alternative to Alfresco share?
Did everyone hear the question? Okay.
Indeed, when we started with Alfresco, WorkDesk didn't exist, or we didn't know that it existed. For some departments, WorkDesk is a solution, but for the broad, the most users in the company, share is enough. Completes. It's enough for doing their job like they have to do it. But for the legal department, it could be a interesting alternative. Yes. Not yet. We have other challenges to go. We have the collaborate part is now on the roadmap, and we are implementing this. And afterwards, we are going to see which new challenges are there. Yes.
And so back to David on what would you have done differently to make it better?
Again, it's probably changed through the life of the actual program as well. In the early days, say we did have some technology challenges actually getting things to work. We looked to use a website publishing mechanism called replication, and really struggled with it. And if I'd looked back, probably to make the call to move to an alternative way of doing things sooner rather than later. We probably lost about 6 weeks at that, but that's a real hindsight. Whether I'll be able to recognise those symptoms again and make that call again going forwards, I don't fully know on that. I think the more latterly as well is when you're moving people from a uncontrolled state to a more controlled state, the system does actually enforce higher levels of behaviour than what they're actually potentially used to within the business. And we made a couple of assumptions that tightly controlled areas of the business were already adequately controlled. And that assumption didn't really hold true. The actual tightly controlled part of the business was nowhere near as tightly controlled as they thought they were and as we thought we were. So again, probably challenging that assumption a little bit earlier, perhaps doing a mini, half a dozen documents, let's take it through the process, let's walk the process a little bit earlier than we did. Because again, those assumptions led us to a bit of a stall, shall we say.
Yeah, I think the lesson I've learned the most, and I've had to learn it a few times, is that it's a customization thread. We've done custom UIs and that's fine, but we would build them separate and tie back to the system. But when we build them in the system, sure enough, there's an upgrade, and now I have to redo everything. And it's really making sure that you sit there, you slim down the UI, make it simple, but when you can configure and when you can customize, try to make sure you separate it as much as possible from the core system, because there are going to be updates to every software component that you have in there, not just Alfresco, but everything else you tie to. And the more loosely coupled they are, the easier it is for you to take advantage of the new features when they come out, and you can move apace. One mistake I see made repeatedly is, we'll upgrade on the next upgrade. And then when that happens, we'll wait one more. And before you realize it, you're so far behind, you're looking at a migration. And the only reason you're looking at migration is it's just so hard to get through those steps. So if you customize less or at least isolate that separate from the system, it allows you the flexibility to have the time, because that upgrades are less effort and you can take advantage of everything that happens. And that's been true on every system I've ever used. So, any questions in the audience? Here, let me bring the mic to you so we can record.
Hello.
Sorry.
So in terms of rollout, either in terms of your user base or in terms of the sort of many and varied optional features that you can turn on in Alfresco, how did you sort of formulate your rollout strategy? Have you learned any lessons from that?
Again, very good question. I say, very good question. We had two distinct threads in this particular project. The first one was very much, it was IT-led. We had to separate from the old company by a given date. And also, we were about to hit a change freeze because there was a little event last year called the Olympics taking place in our area as well. So there was a bit of a lockdown. So how we approached that deployment was different to how we then approached subsequents. And what we did with the first phase was we really made sure that we put in place the foundation and made sure the foundation was robust, that we could then come along with the business users later on to exploit many areas of that. We worked on an agile-ish type of approach, and we broke our program down into drops of 2 or 3 monthly chunks, and we time-boxed them. Scope varied a little bit in that, but we found we had a lot more success doing lots of little releases rather than promising one big release and it'll be fantastic in 6 months' time when it arrives. So we were very much, okay, we can understand where you want to get. Let's do the first bit now. And document adoption was part of it. Let's just use it as it is out of the box. Then let's look at what's metadata is valid, and then let's look at automating this with rules and workflow, for example. So from the adoption there, we did get people using the lower level features of it very, very early, and then built on that as we went through. And that technique suited our client very well. We started looking at a waterfall type of approach, you know, requirements-driven, spec-driven delivery and UATs. But we very quickly moved away from that into tell us roughly what you want to do. We'll play back to you, this is how we believe Alfresco does it in the, you know, this particular manner, and then have a play. And then come back after a week, and then we'll start to make the changes as you've suggested as such. So we very much found really a continuous improvement type approach rather than a big bang. And also really part of our leadership role, playing back to the customers. Yeah, we understand roughly what you want to do. This is how we think you can exploit the technology best. They didn't always like it. You know, quite often they did prefer, I'd like this to be blue, please, or I'd like this to be green. But again, we didn't really try and get deviated down those routes.
Yeah, if you start going down the color coding, then you're going to be lost forever.
At our company, we followed the same approach. Small, simple steps are the first one to take, and then we implemented more difficult, complex stuff. And we also we listen to our business users, to their wishes. We listen also to our integrator, so to see that what the wishes can match the technology. We don't want to jump too far at once. So small steps at a time, and the business users also have to evolve in the system. They also have to learn to use the system. And what we also did was regular demos. So we had a 3 months release, and in between we had a demo for the key business users every 3 weeks of how far we stood with the project, what was coming, so they could react, and they did react when some functionalities weren't going the way they wanted, or we could steer at the right points in the direction they wanted.
I can't iterate enough the incremental steps process, because you get a lot of goodwill. Once you get that minimum level out there and then you start adding a little bit, what the users see is the people see improvements. They see steady progress, and you're buying a lot of patience. And all of a sudden when you say, we're going to get to that feature in whatever, they believe you because they see continuous improvement coming out. And that way, if you have a hiccup or a problem, they're much more forgiving. When you have this big bang approach and you launch it and they don't like it, you're going to take you a while to fix it. So by doing that little approach, you buy a lot of goodwill and a lot of patience from them. I have one question I want to ask them, because we're getting low on time, and then if we have time after that, we'll take more from the audience. And we'll start with Jan first. Is if there is one piece of advice that you could give everyone in our audience, what would that be?
Listen to the business users. They are the ones who are going to use the program, the things you are making for them, and communicate a lot with them, and communicate also with the developers or your integrator, because they know what's technically possible. So communication, talk, that's an advice I can give. No big bang, but a lot of communication, and with the right persons in the company, of course.
I think the piece of advice that I'd probably suggest you take away from this as well is, at the start of the initiative, when you're planning this, or you're even just looking at what the actual business problems are, make sure you can actually overachieve at that point. Don't set yourself up to fail. And what I think I mean by that is be realistic about what does success look like. You know, don't necessarily think, oh, this new technology, let's deploy it to 5,000 people. We'll have all the documents in there and it'll be finished by next Tuesday. You know, be realistic with respect to setting the expectations within the business and for your own good as well. You know, you don't want to be setting out on these journeys and it's going to take, you know, nights and nights of stress to get there. There's going to be times when that will happen, but I think at the outset of these, really set yourself objectives that you can achieve and surpass.
You know, I don't think I could roll out Dropbox by next Tuesday to 5,000 people. My piece of advice Jan took, it was listen to the business user. That's the best thing you can possibly do. They have to work with it. They have to use it. Make them your allies. I mean, you're solving their problem. Make sure you understand that problem to solve. We have time for one more question.
I won't ask a question to Jan because I know his project very well. But one to David. How much time did it take? Because you said like it takes time to roll out to the approximate number of users that you have now, and how much time it took really to technically and politically to roll it out?
Again, very, very good question. And if we roll back to it, when we did the separation and we put the foundation layer in place, at that point, all the capabilities were available to everyone. It didn't necessarily mean everybody was adopting them and using them on that basis. That came secondary. But it took us around about 4 months to put the website in place, and that was in a hosted environment, to replicate that in the on-premise world as well with the intranet, and to put the document management and collaboration features in both of those. So it was roughly 4 months to set the platform and to have, as I say, a firm foundation that we could then, well, what we actually did, we got the business to bid for projects to actually create demand that we would then come along and satisfy. And that's ongoing. You know, from the continuous improvement perspective, you know, we set a drop, a 3-monthly drop. We look at what we're going to include within that drop, and then move on to the next one. So I don't, and I think if I look back on this, I don't think I've ever seen a content management system finished. You know, the deployment project may well have been finished, but the adoption is ongoing. You know, the tweaking's ongoing. And we're transitioning to business as usual at the moment, knowing full well that things will be changing after the programs wind down.
Well, the business changes. I mean, the environment changes. You have to go with it. So, Jan, how long did it take for you to get rolled out to all your users? What was that time frame? I mean, it's not fair that you should get out of this question.
Let's think. We implemented March last year, and we've been there for about a year and a half. But I take the analysis phases also into account. We have preparing the requirements, actually setting up the user groups, all the framework. And it took us about 3 months before we get started with installing something and configuring something. And then from the first implementation, from the first release in March last year, till and the last release was in September this year for our ECM part. But what David said is true. It's never stopping. In beginning we have to pull questions of our users, and later on they still asked us other functionalities, other things. So we had to halt our project at a certain moment. The business is evolving, and we had to stop it. So, in short, about a year and a half.
That's good. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists, please? Thank you.